Hello, everybody. This is Mari Wu, moderator of the Section 4 of International Forums of Taiwan exhibition Impossible Dreams for the Venice Biennale 2022. The forums are organized by curator and Professor Patrick Flores from Philippines. Welcome to join this panel, Freedom of Others, Other Freedoms. At the time when we are experiencing a pandemic and the Third World War may be imminent, talking about freedom can be easily questioned. Is there really such a thing as freedom? What is the form of freedom? People living in different societies may have different answers to it. In Impossible Dreams, artists like Guangyu Cui and Huang Zhentang's works were dealing with issues related. Guangyu Cui was presented in Venice Biennale 2005 titled The Spectre of Freedom, curated by Jiaji Jason Wang. Cui's 18 Cooper Guardians in Shaolin Temple and Shortcut to the Systematic Life are performance video works. Taking the urban space as a stage through the interaction and intervention between his body and the environment, he explores both the tolerance limits of our living system as well as the possibilities of the resistance to it. Are we really free? He questions, in particular, the built systems we live in. And Huang Zhentang was presented in Venice Biennale 2007 titled Artopia, curated by Hong Zhanglin. Her I Go Traveling 5, using a postcard with scenery reflecting on contemporary issues of translation and communication through the action of reconstructing this old famous landscape photograph. Her work express a desire for mobility away from familiar, but at the same time trying to reconstruct the image from the past, what's familiar. From language to action, from memory to perception, her desire for communication seems in vain. The travel, a form of freedom, thus becomes a kind of self-exile. The two artists' works reflect on our living world and life experiences, but there are imperative political issues that touch on freedom, balance, resistance, and so on. It considers disagreements as well as solidarities built around race, gender, ethnicity, spirituality, sexuality, sovereignty, and so on. The three speakers of this panel will elaborate further these issues from different perspectives. So I would like to invite each of them to speak about 20 minutes. After that, we will have a panel discussion. Now, let me introduce them in speaking order, starting with Khanyisile Mbongwa. Khanyisile Mbongwa is a Cape Town-based independent curator, award-winning artist, and sociologist who engages with her curatorial practice as curing, thus using the creative to instigate spaces for emancipatory practices, joy, and play. She is the curator for Liverpool Biennial 2023. And Irwan, Ahmett, and Tita Salina are an artist duo from Jakarta. In their practice, they frequently translate social issues into events that unfold spontaneously in the public sphere as a form of urban play, generating critical alternatives to complicated issues. Ladislava Gažiová is an artist who lives and works in Prague. In recent years, her work has explored issues of social exclusion, everyday racism, the social consequences of the crisis of neoliberal politics, and has addressed in detail the cultural and political situation of Roma ethnicity throughout history. Now, please welcome our speakers.
Thokozani bogogo nabomkhulu, makhehle namakhehlekazi. Sithokozisa qamata umvele enqamumeni wento zonke umhlanguli. Wena wezulu wena womhlaba unengcebe yonke into ekhulayo emhlabeni. Siyathokozisa umbongo ugade ulombuyiso nyamazana kamthi mkhulu. Nibakhulu nina nengangonkulunkulu. Ngisho kunokhoza ontsele ondukuzamile emthonjweni ngibaswele indawo yokumila. Omfe emnyama. Ngiyathokozisa okhumalo omntungumbulaso wadla umuntu emnyenga ngendaba. Owadla amakhamba amabini kwasalodwa vo. Ngisho umzilikazi kamashobana wena wawela izizibuzizwa ngondondolo. Ngiyathokozisa umadondo umthembu umwelasa uqudeni uthukela umnquhe. Ngiyathokozisa umabaso wabasentabeni kwadliwa ilanga selishona. Ngiyathokozisa ujola amampondomise amahle, umthwakazi, umngwanya, umanza mnyama, umanza mdaka. Ngiyathokozisa umbathane, umgcina, uchachu. Ngiyathokozisa uAmira, umvelo, uthandiwe. Ngiyathokozisa uSithole, uJobe. Ngiyathokozisa umtshali, umthandi, uhlophe. Nazo zonke izihlwele engizaziyo nengazaziyo ngiyazithokozisa. Engihamba nazo izithunywa, ikhehlele engiphethe, thokozani manyanga amahle, thokozani manyanga amakhulu. Nsithi ayendawo ndawo, ayendawo ndawo, ayendawo. So as I think about freedom of others and other freedoms, I want to say that this way of introducing myself and this way of tracing my lineage is part of me acknowledging and honoring my ancestors and the work they've done to pave the way for my coming, to pave the way for my arrival, to pave the way for the work that I have to do. And the importance to trace myself and trace my lineage to who I am and trace my journey and where my people come from so that I can understand where I am and where I'm going. And you will see as I sort of unpack my thoughts in this text that I'll be sharing with you, why it is important to acknowledge the ancestral and to acknowledge the ancestral as being present in our beings in our everyday, because I know I am not here just by my own volition, but I'm also here because my ancestors dared to dream me into existence, dared to imagine me into existence. And so I have been thinking a lot about Black and queer privacy. I've been thinking a lot about indigenous and ancestral privacy and what it means for Black folk and queer folk to have a private life, given that being born Black, being born queer is already to be in protest. It is to be in solitary confinement because the world already knows how to kill you. Given that being born Black, being born queer is to be available, to be accessible, to be disposable. So how do we imagine and manifest a world from a place where we desire our privacy? I thought I'd share, I'd start actually by reading a curatorial text that I wrote for an exhibition I curated in Maastricht, in the Netherlands at Marais Contemporary House of Culture that was titled History's Footnote on Love and Freedom. And the text begins and reads as follows. History keeps creeping into the present. It is the past that is never the past because it cannot be unlived. We are not standing on a solid ground and words are never neutral. So to look at history through the lens of love and freedom is a daunting and liberating task. And to engage with footnotes is to burst the entire story open and witness the narrative gush out for air. It is to move from decolonial perspectives to emancipatory practices. It is a work of moving through the unreconciled grief and to love the unlovable. And this is why we must attend to the way we look and see, by paying forensic attention, by paying forensic care, and by paying attention to the moment and speaking into the future as we recall the past. We are writing against time on how to survive this present, and thus to be alive to the stories of your dead is the least the living can do. It is therefore our task, so to speak, to brush history against the grain by intervening in it through exhibition making and other creative processes. So last year, after spending a day with my spiritual mother, whom I love very much, she wrote me a text, and the text is around the ways in which we love and how love is connected to freedom. And she writes to me and she says, Khany, only free people can make a free world. While there are alternative sources of love in our biological lines, our children also love whom they love and should not be compelled to negotiate alternatives. Therein lies the ultimate freedom. Love is a force of unrestricted flow, and our first experience of it alone can determine how free we become. Only free people can make a free world. When we do not free ourselves from the things that claim us, the things that hold us hostage as parents of children for whom we intend freedom, we will continue to seek their freedom in the books we read, and in so doing miss the opportunity to be changed, rearranged, and freed by their daily acts of freedom contained in their love. We cannot continue to look for one more thing to keep us away from them in the name of material comforts for them. Our freedom lies in the exploration of ways that in our times keep them close while we generate materialism. Only free people can free the world. And so I sat with these words for weeks. I kept running back to them to listen again and again. Only free people can create a free world. And so I thought, so what now? What now, given our history of oppression, of colonialism, of slavery that permeates our present? Does that mean we cannot make a free world? Does that mean I can't make a free world? I don't know how to surrender myself fully to this notion, though I understand and resonate with it. But I also know many of us are a result of the imaginative work of our oppressed and enslaved ancestors. And this is why I have been preoccupied by the thread that connects love and freedom, often wondering how those who were denied freedom enacted love. And I keep getting stuck on love as resistance, or love as survival, or love as protest. But what about joy, about laughter, about pleasure, about softness? What about them, those who were enslaved, colonized, and oppressed, making a free world that didn't require them to die so it can be in existence? And so I start to imagine artists, writers, musicians, philosophers, and other creative practitioners to go as archaeologists into the repository of our past, guided by their curiosity and lived experience, that they will excavate perspectives that allow us entry to narratives of possibilities, narratives that disrupt the canonic archive by representing those who have been oppressed, not only as an index of suffering and pain, but also as something being made and life being freed. I imagine them engaging with counter-narratives as a space of aliveness, joy, rest, pleasure, flourishing, play, and softness. As resistance and memorial, exploring it as a necessary form of resilience and protest from the historically marginalized, and tracing how these counter-narratives introduce other realities that shift us into emancipatory practices, into freedom, and therefore love. So what I found during the formation of this exhibition, working alongside artists, is that I was faced once again with transcending a term, a word, a call that has sat uncomfortably in my body as long as I can remember, right? And I have been pecking at it. I've been pecking at it and tracing its discomfort in my psyche. I then realized that underlying this call for Black people, for people of color, for queer people, for poor people to transcend was denial. The enslaved African was denied access to the ancestral by being kidnapped and made into a slave. Then again, denied access to the celestial by being Christianized and their faith demonized. And so they learned to maintain the line that sits between both. Our ancestors learned to maintain this line that sits between the ancestral and the celestial, and that's transcending. Forced to move between the line of catastrophe and aliveness, this creates this axis where transcending is at the central connecting point or intersection between the vertical celestial ancestral and the horizontal catastrophe and aliveness. And for generations, we have been vibrating on this intersection where we have to transcend ourselves in order to exist in the first place. So now that we understand the weight of the lie that comes with being denied and the perpetual request to transcend, there are possible narratives and narratives of possibility that begin to emerge. Like we begin to understand that we are not just made of colonial or enslavement violence. We are not just made of apartheid violence. We are also made of ancestral wisdom. And so I suggest, or rather I call for us to thrust our bodies to the somatic response of ancestral wisdom and our grandmother's technology. Purely because precarious bodies are the only bodies who are always seeking freedom because of our proximity to death. It is being in a state of restlessness and a desire for normality. This restlessness is conditioned by historical transmissions of being suspended in colonial violence, apartheid violence, racist violence, and having to exist in its extremities as some form of acceptance of lines, of how lines are drawn, how spaces are marked, and how grids are formulated even on our bodies. And so the desire for normality is that of relevance. In a sense that, one, normality is anything. Normality is anything but this violence. Two, it is to exist without having to justify nor explain your existence. Three, it is to have not only the capacity to dream, but also the space to dream and have access to the resources to manifest the dreaming. So for me, the shift from decolonizing perspectives to emancipatory practices is paramount, where we move to centralizing ourselves as an act of necessity in embodying radical self-love. that the practice of emancipation is not a reaction, nor is it a response to colonialism or slavery, but rather a necessity in self-fashioning and self-actualization. Because then we are creating a space for self-reconciliation. And in this space, I believe that we begin to practice hope as a discipline where we give ourselves permission to hurt, where we give ourselves permission to rest, where we give ourselves permission to fail, where we give ourselves permission to be queer, Black, Indigenous, ancestral, without justification or explanation. For the ancestral archive is the somatic body that does not only mean trauma. I am sure there's also other strategies there. Do you get that? You know, that hope is a discipline where we give ourselves permission to hurt, where we give ourselves permission to rest, where we give ourselves permission to fail, where we give ourselves permission to be Black, queer, Indigenous, ancestral, without justification, without explanation. For the ancestral archive in the somatic body does not only mean trauma. I am sure there's also other strategies there. Thank you.
When we got accepted to have an artist in residency program in one prestigious art institution in Tokyo, we had one opportunity to experience a reflective moment beyond us as human beings, about hopes and despair, and other things too difficult to be said. In order to bind those as memories, along with some fellow artists, we did an excursion to the radioactive contaminated areas that have been abandoned by poor residents, until we stopped at an area less than 3 kilometers away from the leaking nuclear plant where materials washed away to the Pacific Ocean and carried away by the wind then landed on any surface on the land. Although we felt the beauty of no presence of humans, but we couldn't bear the eeriness in people's memories. The destructive silence manifested spontaneously in a work we might not be able to see it again.
We pick a room in abandoned nursing home, clean it and tidy it up as if nothing happened, or as if this room was restored from a disaster beyond human control. Would it confuse humans in the future? Or would humans still exist on this planet for hundreds of thousands of years to come?
Okay.
We are so happy to be connected with artists and art activists in this opportunity. Please allow us to tell a bit about our bio.
The theme of our geopolitics has become the basic color of our canvas in the last decade. As artists, we are gradually and continuously trying to explore the ring of fire, seeking space for imagination as well as understanding the coalition of the Earth's plates and human conflicts that overlap in the sediment of civilization. However, the limited mobility during the pandemic has brought our space of expression into body-scale spaces, such as the biological side of living things, archaic traits, evolutionary perspectives, while looking for a grip on paradoxical human values.
We actually have no formal art educations. Irwan and I studied graphic design in Jakarta. Picking up art as a choice is a privilege amidst the physical constructions of the vibrant industrial society in polarizations of identity politics. In the global art vortex, that is eventually very oriented to be the poles and the coalitions of institutions. At some points, we have doubt whether there still are honest artworks or exhibitions.
Is honesty still needed in the context of modern world today?
Has globalization given birth to a new trend?
What about participatory art?
Why are we skeptical with the social engaged art practice?
Why do art collectives often become exploitation traps?
How do we react more sharply to a politically correct art?
Are we prepared to be a cancel culture?
At the highest level of art, we feel that art is covered by ambition, enjoyed by over-educated audience that thicken the fog that covers up the more human aesthetic cognitive essence, when a long time ago it was born from the womb of evolution through the expression chimney, then let out the aesthetic soul which supposed to be archaic.
Days by days, he became weaker and weaker. One day when I went to Tokyo for a show, sometimes he killed himself. He kills himself. This is himself. When I hear this new folk Sato, because I sometimes was in Tokyo. Even believe that. When I can live here, I see her, I see him. Yes. I was so sadly. Yes.
Apocalyptic Smile is a performance project with limited audience and was held secretly during the city lockdown in June 2020. It derives from our childhood experience of total solar eclipse on June 11, 1983, and the government false information about the eclipse. The eclipse was briefly occurred, but left a deep impression due to what was mainly said, that looking at the eclipse could cause blindness for the rest of our lives.
Recounting the encounter with the son of Corona, which is similar to what the coronavirus is, the crown, the performance was divided into 5 phases: sun, mourning, inclusion, linguistic, and evidence that creates smile. We then questioned the gesture of smiling on various occasions.
The following are our findings about human expression. The smiling general. At the peak of the Cold War, Lieutenant General Suharto, at the time, took over Indonesian government leadership, which later on, the most brutal massacre happened, and become one of the darkest history of our country. That's never resolved, and nobody talks about it openly, even until today. Toward the end of his reign, Suharto got the nickname, the Smiling General.
When Elon Musk began his career on space travel in the United States in the 90s, far away in the east there was a 20-year-old man from the western tip of Java Island. He chose to affirm his faith towards heaven in a hail of bullets, mortar explosions, and the intimacy with death in Snow Valley of Afghanistan.
His small body became the focal point of the battle of interest between US and Soviet Union through militancy groups that sprang up after the collapse of Ottoman Empire.
His love of death was revealed in his book, which was decorated with victims of massacres in Palestine, Afghanistan, Iraq, Poso and Ambon in Indonesia, and the scandalous photos of torturing Abu Ghraib in prisons by American soldiers.
Injustice had made his perspective on religion as an expression of a cosmic struggle between good and evil.
Irwan has one habit of collecting post-mortem photos of suicide bombers or extremists. Irwan, could you help me interpret their last expression? Is it a gesture of hellish pain or heavenly smile? Well, smile is as a result of complex biological work that can be modified perfectly through plastic surgery. As we also know, the accuracy of facial recognition is getting more and more perfect, and smiles are no longer exclusive to humans anymore. Humanoids are starting to have a complex emotional expressions, even though they still look creepy. This is the mechanical structures of the most sophisticated sex doll today, and it has a very beautiful name, Solana.
Solana, Salina, slightly different from Salina, but of course Salina's smile is much prettier than Solana's. Although maybe in the next few decades, perhaps years, there will come a time when the machines have more better smile than us.
Apocalyptic Smile was presented through a lecture performance. At the ending stage, we created the conditions of a small experience for audiences to learn and practice how to do an apocalyptic smile amidst the threat of uncontrolled pandemic at that time, and it might continue until, I don't know, where we were losing a perfect interactively expressions from our faces because of face masks we have been constantly wearing. The second project is Name Laundering. This title, Name Laundering, is inspired from an event where a mysterious bank customer from Indonesia made a black money transfer of 1.3 billion US dollar to a bank in Singapore. Since Singapore became an independent country, its territory has expanded 22% and will continue to expand 8% more until the year 2030. Irwan declared an oath.
To never set foot on the land of Singapore again.
Because his name is suspected and somehow tainted whenever he entering Singapore border. The declaration took place at the biggest airport in Asia, Changi. It is built on reclaimed land where the sand originated from the Riau archipelago that's been mined for more than 30 years.
Name Laundering project re-examines the relations of Indonesia and Singapore in the Malacca Strait as the most important waters in Southeast Asia. Conflicts for control stretched out as long as sacred oaths were thrust in the land of fighters, as well as agreements of greedy corporations.
The development of this work is rooted on the impact of colonialism, the sabotage of armed forces in the confrontation with Malaysia, the practice of seafarers hijacking ships, the smuggling or smuggling routes, and the ecological destructions resulted from land clearings and unchecked exploitations of natural resources.
We created a polite subversive act to respond to the state control haunted by economic interests and a dogmatic agenda of nationalism. The acts are 8 plans to penetrate the border of Singapore without state permissions. As an artist who attempts to be an amateur smuggler, I must learn 3 things related to the geopolitics in the region.
First, the Straits of Malacca. Nearly 100,000 ships pass the straits every year. The straits are the world's second busiest shipping routes for oil transit choke points. Tankers from the Middle East to Japan, China, Korea, and commodities from Asia to Europe and vice versa. These ships pass through one of the world's narrowest straits that's only 3 kilometers wide. Second, the Kra Canal, recently changed to the Thai Canal, a 400 years old plan that hasn't been realized until now. The Thai Canal is believed to be able to change the game, not just for Thailand, which would transform from an agrarian country to an export and import player, but it could also change the positions of Thailand in Asia. Theoretically, the Thai Canal would be the rival of the Straits of Malacca because it would shorten the mileage and save the fuel. Economically, it would look profitable, but what kind of impact could happen to the environment and the ongoing tensions and violence in the south of Thailand?
Third, Batam Island. Batam was intended to be developed with high expectations to become a center of export-oriented high-tech industry. It was then projected to be exactly the same as the upcoming new Indonesian capital city in Borneo to build a smart city as a means to rival Singapore as Indonesia's center for the world. However, the urbanizations and migration programs started during that time become uncontrollable. Batam Island was developed in the 80s or 90s, relying on an industrialization spirit. Meanwhile, cultural integration processes were neglected, leading to power struggles between ethnic groups, gangsters, and the military. There is an 8 plans. Here is one out of 8 plans of acts to penetrate the border of Singapore that I have done. Number 2, Smokeland.
So there is like a change of wave stream in front of us right now. So it was believed that from here to along this to that direction to this white ships. Yeah. Underneath there is like a big coral. So that makes the stream directions change. So it's big streams between. So this is quite wave, and over there is quite calm. So Irwan right now is still on the border. Because in the legend, it tells that after that incident, on that spot, sometimes there's like a current. Ships can get lost. The ship can, sucked by the currents and then drown. So we are in an international border. The signal is still going strong. So if you see the cargo ship, right in front of the cargo ship, there is like a buoy. So that indicates the border between the international border and Singapore. Behind that buoy, so it's already Singapore. Okay, we challenge Bangladesh. So approaching the last border, this is the closest distance from the cargo ship. Okay, we are right now from the border. So yeah, Bangladesh, there's a patrol. Yeah, okay. So we are waiting whether there's a sign from the signal right now. Yeah. Singapore. So Irwan touched them. Water and drink it. How does it taste?
There are so many we would like to tell, but because of the limited time, we have to end this now. But we believe on the next encounter, we could see more sweeter smiles.
My name is Irwan Ahmett.
My name is Tita Salina.
Thank you very much.
Hello, my name is Ladislava Gažiová, and I preferred my reflection as it fits me from the position of artist and a topic that deals with freedom of others in connection with art. Personally, I consider it right to separate activism from artistic work, and I try to adhere to this principle. In 1989, the philosopher Etienne Balibar introduced a term of égalité, which is a combination of the terms égalité, it's equality, and liberté, it's freedom, into political philosophy. Balibar, in an interview with the philosopher Petr Kužel, which was published in the Philosophical Journal in Prague in 2016, says in I Simplify the Answer that the theory of liberal thinkers defends the incompatibility of these two concepts, that is, the incompatibility of policies emphasizing nature and human rights, and the concept of social rights. That is why we more often find today that freedom is preferred while equality is lagging behind. On the contrary, Balibar combines this concept and says that they are inseparable, and he specifies, I quote, "However, this does not mean that there is no tension between terms, or in extreme cases there is not even a contradiction. The point, however, is that this contradiction is not historically inevitable, and that radical democratic politics consists in its recognition and resolution." Balibar develops this concept deeper and more comprehensively. I mention this to emphasize that the concept of freedom only makes sense to me if social rights are met. Freedom is freedom only if one has a dignified socioeconomic background, education, access to healthcare, and work which is ideally meaningful and non-alienated. Without this connection, freedom becomes a vague and empty concept. Therefore, my contribution is necessarily related to social issues. Let me show you a short video called Social Murder, which we made as a collective of the Our Club for the exhibition Manush Means Human for Vienna Kunsthalle in 2021. The work connects an extract from the 1845 well-known book by Friedrich Engels, The Condition of the Working Class in England, and the current condition in East Slovakia, where I come from. In this book, Engels describes in detail the conditions and lives of English workers and those of Irish labor immigrants of the time. Today, 177 years later, I read this book and I can see the social conditions that are incredibly familiar despite different context and time. I emphasize that I am talking about social conditions because in the territory of the former Czechoslovakia and also in Europe, the impoverishment and exploitation of workers had changed after the Second World War. After reading this book, one probably has to realize that freedom and inequality are not related to skin color, ethnicity, identity, sexuality, etc., but are conditioned by socioeconomic conditions, or in others' words, the class. The saying, the richer the whiter, confirms this in a way, however, and that is why I am choosing as an example a text from the environment of white workers from Ireland in the 19th century England. It is known that white skin color does not help a person if they are poor.
Problémy chudobných vznikajú viac menej z neviazanosti v pôžitkoch, nedostatku predvídavosti a neschopnosti podrobiť sa sociálnemu poriadku a vôbec neschopnosti obetovať okamžitý pôžitok neskoršej výhode. Môžeme sa tomu však diviť? Nevrhá sa prirodzene trieda, ktorá si za svoje utrpenie a poníženie môže dopriať tak málo pôžitkov, a najmä tých najviac zmyselných, do nich priam bláznivo a slepo? Aký má trieda, o ktorej vzdelanie sa nikto nestará, ktorá je vydaná na pospas všetkým možným nevýhodám, ktorá nepozná žiadne existenčné istoty, záujem na tom, aby predvídala, aby viedla solidný život? A prečo by namiesto priazne okamihu myslela na vzdialené radosti, ktoré sú navyše práve pre ňu a jej večne kolísajúce a premenlivé postavenie veľmi neisté? Hovoríme predsa o triede, ktorá musí niesť všetky nevýhody sociálneho poriadku, pričom nemá nič z jej výhod. Trieda, ktorej sa tento sociálny poriadok zdá iba nepriateľský. Od tejto triedy sa ešte žiada, aby tento sociálny poriadok rešpektovala? To je skutočne príliš veľa. Pokiaľ však tento sociálny poriadok trvá, najchudobnejšia trieda mu nemôže uniknúť. A keď sa voči nej aj vzbúri jednotlivec, najväčšiu škodu utrpí on sám. Tým sociálny poriadok takmer znemožňuje slušný rodinný život. Neobývateľný špinavý dom, ktorý je horko ťažko dobrý na prespanie, úboho zariadený, kam často zateká, kde sa nekúri, s nedýchateľným vzduchom v preplnených miestnostiach, nemôže byť útulným domovom. Muži a ženy sú väčšinou bez práce a keď ju už nájdu, je to väčšinou ťažká práca v zahraničí, ďaleko od domova. K tomu neustále pokušenie v podobe alkoholu a drog. Ako je pri tom všetkom možný rodinný život? Napriek tomu človek nemôže byť bez rodiny. Musí v rodine žiť. A výsledkom toho sú ústavičné rozpady rodín a rodinné hádky, ktoré majú na manželov, manželky a hlavne na deti hlboko demoralizujúci vplyv. U tamojších ľudí je veľmi časté zanedbávanie všetkých domácich povinností, najmä zanedbávanie detí, a súčasné spoločenské zriadenie to len podporuje. A deti, ktoré vyrastajú takto divoko, v ohromne demotivujúcom prostredí, ktorého súčasťou sú aj samotní rodičia, sa ešte majú stať jemnými a mravnými ľuďmi? Požiadavky, ktoré kladie samolúby príslušník vyšších tried na chudobných, sú skutočne naivné. Nerešpektovanie sociálneho poriadku vyniká najviac vo svojej extrémnej podobe. V zločine. Ak príčiny, ktoré človeka obvykle demoralizujú, pôsobia na chudobného človeka silnejšie a sústredenejšie, stane sa z neho zločinec s takou istotou, s akou voda pri 100 stupňoch Celzia prechádza z kvapalného skupenstva do plynného. Surovým spôsobom, akým sa vyššie triedy správajú k chudobným ľuďom, sa tí stávajú vecami bez vôle a rovnako ako voda nutne podliehajú prírodným zákonom. V určitom bode strácajú akúkoľvek slobodu. Keď jednotlivec spôsobí druhému ublíženie na tele, a to také, ktorému privodí smrť, nazývame to zabitím. Pokiaľ páchateľ vopred vedel, že toto ublíženie spôsobí smrť, nazývame jeho čin vraždou. Ale čo ak spoločnosť privedie tisíce ľudí do situácie, v ktorej musia umrieť predčasnou, neprirodzenou smrťou, ktorá je rovnako násilná ako smrť nožom či guľkou? Čo ak berie tisícom potrebné podmienky k životu a vháňa ich do pomerov, v ktorých sa jednoducho nedá žiť? Ak ich mocnou rukou zákona núti v týchto pomeroch žiť, až pokým si po nich nepríde smrť, ak spoločnosť veľmi dobre vie, že tieto tisíce sa stanú obeťou takýchto podmienok a napriek tomu dopustí, aby tieto podmienky trvali aj naďalej, tak je to vražda rovnako, ako keď zabije niekoho jednotlivec. Je to však vražda skrytá, zákerná. Je to vražda, ktorej sa nikto nemôže brániť. Vražda, ktorá sa nezdá byť vraždou, pretože vraha nevidno. Pretože vrahmi sú všetci a zároveň nikto. Pretože smrť obete vyzerá ako smrť prirodzená a pretože je skôr zločin zo zanedbania, než zločin spáchaný. Ale vraždou zostáva. Práve preto ho musíme nazývať sociálnou vraždou.
Let me ask you, in connection with art, a few questions that I think are important, even if we may not have clear solutions and answers. The criticism implied in the questions is not intended to offend or delimit. These are questions to think about, and they are critical of myself. How can a person from poor socioeconomic background participate in the creation of art and as an artist or a spectator? Do they have an opportunity to see art in their lives? And can they understand art without art education? And if so, will today's art be close to them? Do they have anything to share? Sometimes I imagine the first historic opening of the Louvre to all without difference during the French Revolution. Later in my thoughts, I moved on the territory of the former Czechoslovakia, the territory of the former Eastern Bloc, where art belonged to everyone, and many inhabitants from the formerly poor strata gradually became spectators and began to have an opportunity to become artists. Art that was addressed to everyone and was understandable is nowadays considered a non-free art. And it was really unfree for some artists. However, this was a lack of freedom of political opinion, not a lack of social freedom. Today, bad social conditions in the former Czechoslovakia was created to others. And it doesn't matter what there's people think politically. They are second in all walks of life. In education that is segregated, in work that is precarious and low paid, and in healthcare that is still works as an achievement of socialist politics, but accessibility is rapidly deteriorating due to the inability to pay health insurance. The topic of others in art resonates very much today, and I am often invited to projects as a descent of a family of people who are considered seconds in the field of art because they are Romani. However, the fact that I am speaking here now is an opportunity that has come because I come from a good socio-economic background. My parents and family are not poor, and I have been able to study art without a problem. Members of my family are not considered as others by the public because they are educated and living in ordinary socioeconomic backgrounds. So there is a strange paradox, certain bias, especially in the field as open as art. Through this peculiar discourse, my voice has a privilege of speaking about the others and the freedom of the others, but I'm afraid I am not competent. In this difficult, it is difficult to talk about a class that is experiencing injustice from the position of a privileged artist. At the same time, that does not mean that every voice that comes from the position of a truly oppressed individual is the right critical voice. Likewise, the involvement in this artistic process of people from the most oppressed sections of society does not guarantee the emergence of truly progressive art. Indeed, real art must necessarily intersect all classes, so that it can be accessible to anyone, regardless of origin, race, gender, or social and economic background. Unfortunately, I believe that today we are witnessing a completely opposite situation.
First of all, thank you very much, our speakers, for your insightful and really very thought-provoking presentations. And for me, your talk have explored quite wide about the concept of freedom. For example, Ladislava have talking about the equality and freedom. And Irwan and Tita discuss nuclear disaster, geopolitics, human conflicts, and human barriers, etc. And Khanyisile brought up issues on colonialism, racial, sexual, and cultural injustice, etc. And Khanyisile also tried to provide a way of emancipating ourselves. So it's really quite diverse what we understand or what we observe under certain circumstances about the concept of freedom. So although it is said in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights that all human beings are born free and equal, and all human beings should enjoy freedom of speech and belief, and freedom from fear and want, etc. But in the world we are living in, it isn't like that. So I wonder, freedom as the milk of dreams, which is the title of the Venice Biennale, is it an impossible dream, which is also the title of Taiwan exhibition. So I wonder what you think in this very difficult situations, how we can really liberate ourselves, and especially Khanyisile has mentioned that only free people can create a free world, and also say that we are supposed to love the unlovable, but how is it possible? What do you think? So I wonder whether Tita or Irwan, do you like to speak about that?
Okay, thank you, Molly. So, yeah, I really like the video that Ladislava showed on the presentation. It's like remind me to the situation in Jakarta or in general in Indonesia, that we still have big problem through the poverty or extreme poverty. I mean, it's in a matter of fact, maybe I just want to elaborate two impact of this situation to our today world. For example, the people who live in this kind of situation, it's almost impossible to get out. I mean, we think the impact, it's the situation it's used by other system. For example, in our project, that the poverty also used by ideological propaganda to brainwash that you now any longer suffer, that we provide you a better life, better dream, that you can go to heaven, and even you can make moral values to the society. So this is a very, for me, it's more realistic dreams, because no politician, no even the government could give this such kind of unimaginable storytelling about heaven. So this lead its potential for like some intellectual actors to brainwash the let's say the marginalized people to change their mind. So and they transform into something else. They transform into more, let's say, more meaningful life, but also the capability to see the world black and white. So which means in a very extreme condition, he allowed even to kill someone because it's not part of his ideology. So in and of course it's maybe too radical, but if I saw from the postmortem of the face, it's quite, for me at least, quite clear that at least they really achieve what they want to do in their life. Of course, it's a very outer city, but if we can remove the violence part, which means the extreme of the poverty and transfer to some kind of messiah dreams to release humans from this dark world, and then he finally achieved that in the highest level to sacrifice his life. And sacrifice is kind of maybe the ultimate feelings. Then we any longer need it if things that we do this not for us but for some ideological belief. But of course, another thing, it's in a very maybe a different. It's not to compare, but for example, in Taiwan, we have so many Indonesian migrant workers who also have come from extreme poverty in Java. So they want to change their dream, go to abroad as a migrant workers. But in the same times, the lifestyle model also need this. The same like in the city, there is rich people, but also the city, it's almost impossible without the poor in the reality. Yeah, maybe that's we would like to highlight about this. But I think if I see the numbers of the rich people, at least in Indonesia or in the world, I think it's possible to solve this. Don't go to Mars. I mean, don't go to change another life. Just fix these problems, and it's possible. But I'm a bit skeptical. Are we human have a goodwill? I don't think that's a big question for our civilization right now. Yeah, thank you.
And Tita, maybe you would like to add more?
Yeah, I think I just want to add short, just short sentence that I think from the observations and from the research that we have done to produce the works, I think this complex of feeling is like the freedoms or hopes or dreams. I think it's always have two sides. Like it has like paradoxical sides. Like if you reach if you want to reach your freedom or if you want to reach dreams, but you have to sacrifice another things. I think we as a human, we cannot have how do you say, like achieve both like really equal, like in a both way. I think, yeah, that's all. Thank you, Mali.
Yeah, so Ladislava has invited Zbigniew Palagran to join the talk. Thank you. And maybe Ladislava or Zbigniew would like also respond to the questions.
Hello, Mali. Thank you very much for inviting me also to the discussion. I would like to speak on behalf of the Ladia. We briefly spoke about the topic before. I would like to follow Irwan words. Actually, I totally agree that the inequality is kind of the biggest problem of our days. And I would like to add that it's not problem of it's hard to find a solution for the 21st century. Maybe because in 20th century we have had kind of the idealistic, utopistic thought behind. I mean, the idea of communism, idea of building a better society. And now, in these days, we are living in the 20th or 21st century, and it's not on the table. I mean, this idea is not on the table actually, and we don't know why actually. And I am sure that is why, because the globalization which came, actually it was globalization, it was capital or the labor which was globalized and brought inequality to all of to all the world, not only from Europe to other world, from Taiwan to Indonesia, or you know what describe Irwan, the situation, immigrant Indonesian workers in Taiwan. So this is hard to say if there is a kind of a solution. And what maybe art, it's one of the field we can still dream or use it for the reflection of the world. But we are also skeptical that it's not possible through the art or via art to change world. So we can very reflect, analyze it, and maybe let's see. So that is a human condition, hope.
So from both of you, I heard that you are really very skeptical to the real situation, and also kind of skeptical to art, because also in the video, in the presentation, that Irwan was saying that you were also critical or skeptical to the so-called political art.
Hi, thank you, Mali, for the introduction, and thank you to everyone else present, and I'm really sorry that I could not be part of the conversation due to time challenges. So yeah, I think I will start talking from the idea of like freedom and this concept of like only free people can create a free world. We know through lived experience that not all humans are born equal or free. So we seek it, we seek freedom. And when I'm inferring love, the unlovable, this also speaks to the history of being denied access to ourselves. and how this legacy of denial manifests in our present. And to that, I sort of want to think through José Munoz, who speaks about utopia as an ideal, something that should mobilize us, push us forward, a moment when the here and the now is transcended by the then and there that could and indeed should be. And so for me, this also speaks to how we can think about our freedom by looking at ancestral wisdom, right? Like, why are we still here if we have encountered generational forms of violences, right? Like, how is it that we have survived these violences? What is it about our lineage or where we come from that has allowed us to be here, created these moments of imagination for our forefathers and foremothers that foregrounds our existence in this moment, right? So this idea of freedom for me also is about that though I know, from a somatic response, but also know from lived experience that we are not born equal, nor are we all born free, right? And that my ancestors, the people that come from my lineage, had to dare themselves into existence, had to imagine themselves into a possibility. Every time a Black woman, a Black queer woman, a Black woman or person of color felt pregnant, in a way that is a dreaming, in a way that is moving towards a possibility, right? So there's that one element that I think through this, how the ancestral can provide us as a historical fact. It can provide us a space of imagination, a space for intellectual discourse, a space of rationale, a blueprint on how we possibly can imagine our freedom and manifest and self-actualize from this imagination. But at the same time, I'm aware there's something fundamentally cruel about optimism, right? Like, fundamentally cruel. And to this regard, I look towards Lauren Berland, who reveals that people remain attached to fantasies of the good life, despite deteriorating social, economic, and environmental conditions. So Lauren's work really researches or examines how such fantasies survive even when the conditions of survival themselves are increasingly compromised under post-war neoliberal restructuring. And she also makes this point about cruel optimism being a relations dynamic whereby as individuals we remain attached to the compromised conditions of possibility or clusters of promises embodied in desired object or idea, even when they inhabit the conditions for flourishing and fulfilling such promises. Because the maintenance of these attachments sustain the good life fantasy, no matter how detrimental or cruel these attachments may be, and they allow people to make it through day-to-day life when it has become unlivable. And I think, it is, though there is this, it's a dichotomy for me, like there's this cruel optimism, right? And then there are these fantasies, and between this cruel optimism and the fantasy is this line again that allows us to sustain ourselves in the unlivable life, to find ways through our imagination, through our desire to survive this moment. And what I'm pushing for is, how do we then become alive? How do we move from this survival, having to survive our experiences of being here, to a place of aliveness? And I think, or I'm suggesting, that art is a moment, right? I'm not saying art is the answer or response to this. I'm saying it is a moment that allows us a possibility to dream, to hold on to our dream, to hold on to our imagination. It allows us a moment in the cruelty of our optimism to say, like, maybe I'm held by this thing here. You know, maybe this thing recognizes my pain. Maybe this thing, this object, this concept, this constellation recognizes and acknowledges my struggles and the struggles of my people. And therefore, I know they're not in vain, right? And I'm not saying that it is a response, but I'm saying it's a moment of possibility. It gives a possible narrative of something else, to hold each other with something else that sits outside of capitalism, right? And there are different forms of art and art spaces in which we function in. And I'm very much aware of that. But I think there's a possibility here that art may give us, as both art and activism intertwined as an intersectional practice of those two. Yeah.
Then, so what do you think? What kind of artistic strategies that you are developing in your art projects, and what kind of effects do you expect? Could you elaborate on the issues? Irwan, do you want to go first? Thank you.
Yeah, it's a difficult question. Yeah, I mean, I was lucky. We went to Venice, right, last month, and it was such a very nice feelings to be there after the pandemic. But also, like Tita said, in the same time, I feel like how people can access to this luxurious exhibition. Not even middle class in Indonesia, because it's just very let's say elite groups. So, and if we can change the impact, yes, maybe for some people, that's even for me. Feel a bit romantic to see my hometown, for example, or in Jakarta, how the people in the marginalized village could access this kind of feelings. So that's why maybe in our work at the moment we try to cross boundaries to non-human things. Like in the last, it's starting the pandemic, we observing the social behavior or cultural behavior on primates, such as orangutan, gibbon. So we often now visiting a primate center in Jakarta to see there's a social structure, but the possibility how we can learn from our ancestors, our long relatives, right? But this is still very long process. But I strongly believe the cognitive capability of human, it still have strong relation with the animals. Like the aesthetic feeling when the bird sings also stimulate our archaic feelings to be more relaxed and want to hear that birds keep singing. So which means the frequency also could stimulate us. So within this mindset, we try to use our body as the agent. In the same time, the accumulation of the big problems, but also the fragile and the weakness, that thing, finally we have to take a risk to put our body in that kind of circumstances of the high contaminated radiation place. I know it's like a bit, let's say, daredevil or stupid to do that, but again, we face our non-human feelings, our feelings in the non-human space, like the contaminated area. It's not possible for human to live there, for example. But and also and the piece that we did for name laundering, maybe Tita, you can also explain about the body agents in our works.
Yes, in the name laundering, that's also really how to say challenge us as a human, how to penetrate the border without permissions. That's actually the goal of the projects. That's referred to Irwan's case when he always got problem when entering Singapore. So in this projects, we use Irwan's body to how do you say, to get experience about crossing the border. For example, he shaved his hair and then he burned it while the forest fire was still on at the Pekanbaru in Sumatra, for example, and then he let the smoke from the hair travel to Singapore within hours. That's physically is not really a body, but the element of the body that's going transfer to the other part of the space, and also about and also when actually both of us trying to cross the border using the fisherman boats, and then challenge ourselves if we can get caught by the sea patrols, for example, and we can feel the tense, and then how it's really we were in the critical situations, and also temporary, talking about the time. And we have to do it quick, and then this kind of senses, I think it's help us to really, to really understand about the real situations, about the main issues, about the name laundering projects, about the main issue behind it. So I think to make to do like interventions and to take risks, sometimes we don't think about where is the artistic aspect about our projects. Sometimes we don't really contextualize it to make it art projects as the main, but to make our sensoric body to be stimulated by this kind of experiences. I think for us that could be considered artistic. But yeah,
can I add some? For me, it's a romantic intervention. So nobody knows that the events actually that's Tita's birthday. So my act penetrate the border of Singapore, not about art, but it's a gift for Tita. But nobody knows. Only, you know.
Yes,
but it's also a kind of counter narrative. Yeah, this is what the Khanyisile has saying. Yeah. Sorry, Tita, you want to continue?
Yes. Well, no, I just want to add like the expect from the expected the expected response. I think when we did successfully doing these interventions or doing kinds of experiences, when we did it as in our imaginations, we consider this is when successful. So we actually don't really give don't really giving a care about the response from others, because I think that's more important.
Yeah. And so I wonder what the Ladislava was thinking, or maybe Spinek, you wanted to say something about it, about your artistic strategies, because I think according to the video as the social murder, it seems to me also a kind of hardcore. You really confronted the problems. So what's your artistic strategies?
Actually, what Irwan again said, it was really very, very touched the heart of the problem, because if we imagine the Venice like a romantic, great, fantastic place for placing art in this moment, but in the same time, it's a privileged people do art or something for privileged people. That's should be clear actually what's going on there. This is not like we are not changing the world. We are trying to do something via art, but it's not the change. But this is on the just for like I would like to add to what Irwan said, and Ladia was thinking about what does it mean, the artistic strategies, and I agree with her that the term is coming from marketing, actually. What does it mean, artistic strategies? It's a kind of the newspeak of marketing, to sell a product or something like, or this behind, what is behind is commodification of art. And so it's not easy to describe strategies, but because of that. But still, there is a like kind of the tactics how to use the art, and we both of us we were work on this several or 2-3 exhibitions under condition of collective, our collective, and other collectives, and we as we said on the beginning that we are very skeptical, so we didn't have any expectation from the exhibition like in Kunsthalle Wien or Display Prague, but still we tried to do best, you know, we knew that who will come to Vienna to the exhibition, into Prague, few people from the middle class, so someone who is educated, who is able to understand. And so we prepared some kind of the exhibition essay, because it was not artwork, it was exhibition, it could be described like exhibition essay, which include several or different kind of the approaches, like video you already saw, or museal artworks or fake artworks. We also invent some kind of the artifacts and so on. And all this we put together and made kind of the clear description what's going on, and it was about the inequality, not about the about the ethnicity of Romani art, for example, in this case, in Vienna. But we really clearly spoke about the inequality, and nothing happened, of course, afterwards. In reviews we got, it was clearly said that was not good art, because there was good type of the thinking, but not good type of the art, was not expected very well.
Yeah, somehow I understand that. I think in a lot of activist work or art intervention, I think it's always a kind of problem that who is our public? You know, it's really always the key question of our activities in the art world. So I just wonder, what do you think? For example, the Khanyisile has mentioned that she suggested a kind of counter narratives. So use these counter narratives as a space of aliveness, joy, rest, pleasure, flourishing, play, and softness. It seems when we are talking about the political conflicts or political problems, it seems that we are just facing our trauma or facing all kinds of difficulties, but forget that that another side of desire, our desire, is about love, about pleasure, about playness, about softness. So what do you think of this? Because I saw this kind of contradiction. And what do you think of that? Maybe Sivnik, do you want to say something about that? So because I just saw this kind of two positions of making art.
Okay, let me we just briefly just speak about, and I will let you know.
Or Tita or Irwan, do you want to say things to that? Mm-hmm.
I have to say, we now approaching the new kind of new world structures. I don't know what it is. For example, the cancel culture. it's happened massively, even in my circle, my own circle. But we don't know this is the impact in the long term. I mean, of course, there is a new values now come out, but I'm afraid we react too fast, like what happened to the internet at the moment. In the beginning, I'm thinking internet is like the best for everybody to get access freedom to knowledge. But what we get right now is just hoax and conspiracy theories. And that is if even the same like books. In the beginning, books, people think it's about a knowledge, but the early books, it's always talking about witch or magic or this kind of fiction who don't have any relation with a knowledge. So and these new norms or new values come from every sector. Maybe I'm too early to say it, but for example, the genders, equality, or LGBTQ, indigenous people, or the spirit of collectivism and etc. This kind of buzzwords now it's come out, which is very good. And I'm so happy finally this kind of norms accepted by the society. But in the reality, in the daily life, it's very difficult. It's almost impossible to apply because it's built. It's built in our archaic DNA that we're always afraid to strangers, and the process also not can be learned by only through art, but through a daily life who shape day by day, second by second. So and again. It's like talking about environmental case, but maybe only the big company who can campaign about a green effect to the environment because they have the power. But how we can deny the exploitation of natural resources, for example. So, and this kind of new value appears, it keeps changing and shapes our society. But in the same times, sometimes I will, maybe this is too early to execute or too optimistic to celebrate. Yeah, it's maybe my reaction. I don't know with it.
Yeah. I think time is up almost. Yeah, we are almost there. But I think you have mentioned that there's positive part in nowadays, for example, through the internet, that we have some kind of freedom for speech. But on the other hand, there are different kind of extremists, also provides their ideology in the internet. So it's still a kind of competition of the many different ideas of the world, no matter it's in the real world or in the virtual world.
Yeah, I think the pandemic, or this particular pandemic, the COVID pandemic, has made us even more aware, even if we didn't want to, made us more aware of the disparities between the haves and the have-nots, right? It has made us somehow realize how complicit we are in the machine that is capitalism and what role we play in feeding the machine. And at the same time, it has showed us how when capitalism, this request, we've always said that like for capitalism to end, it will have to eat itself. What actually happens in reality when the system of capitalism starts to dissolve into itself, that the people that actually suffer are those who already don't have, right? And these are the points that are made by some of the speakers within this panel. And I understand that. I understand that also through a lived experience of having had to live a particular life, being born the way that I am and being born in the township in South Africa and what the township space, which is a ghetto space in South Africa, was meant to produce, was created to produce cheap Black labor. And I'm part of that cheap Black labor, right? I'm part of that. It was meant to produce cheap Black labor, which means that you are born, you work, you die, and in between there is nothing much to sustain you for a living. So I understand that, and I'm very much aware of that because I've moved through that, I've lived through that, and I continue to live through that in various ways. I'm aware also from a migration perspective, having family that have migrated in and out of different parts of the African continent and in the African diaspora, and what that means, both in a socioeconomic, culture tradition, gender sexual perspective, and how those who do not have, when we speak about migration, we are speaking about a different kind of moving through the world that is a complete denial of our existence and therefore are consistently put in a space of dehumanization. And so this is why I think I look towards art of like, what can the space that allows a form of creation, that allows a form of like making and doing and imagining, what can it possibly give? What can it offer, right? If I think specifically, and I'm speaking from a South African perspective of like having moved through apartheid, having had family, that lives in this day, have moved through apartheid, and the way in which art, music, performance played a role in the imagination of Black people to seek freedom and emancipation. And the question now, of course, is whether we have achieved that, or what form of that have we achieved, of what reality we live now in a post-apartheid democratic South Africa. What is that? And what are we grappling with now? What is the aftermath? But what I've seen and witnessed and observed is that art can be generative. It can sustain the dream. And therefore, the dream can sustain us. And it's this sustenance, it's this sustenance that I'm interested in, that doesn't ask me to transcend my lived experience of being Black, queer, African, ghetto. That this sustenance or sustaining of the dream does not require me to break myself in order for me to figure out. It's not a romanticized notion of what dreaming is, right? And so I think art can be a place of negotiation, to negotiate your own history, yourself, the amnesia and erasure that comes with like the concept of nationalization. It can be a space of armoring yourself through specific knowledge systems that sit outside of the Western norms or Western forms of knowledge, which are recognized in the way that we have to exist in this world, right? It can be a place of learning and unlearning, learning about oneself and the things that have been erased for over 400 years, learning about the things that you've been denied access to, and unlearning the internalized violence that comes with colonialism, that comes with the apartheid system, that comes with any form of subjugation and oppression. Unlearning the internalized perspective of what you might perceive yourself as because of these projections. It can be a space of meditating. Art also is an expense. It comes at an expense. It's a cost, to oneself. But I don't think we should rule it out as a space of possibility, as a space where we can imagine so that we can figure out how dreaming could potentially be and what freedom could potentially be. Because if we think about the work that art collectives have done historically and how art collectives in themselves are a continuous, deliberate response to the economic framework, to the socio-political conditions in which art collectives are born from and are born through, as a way of providing other ways of holding space, sustaining both the individual and the collective. So of course, to arrive at this point of, I don't even think I'm being optimistic. I think I'm trying to find a way to channel through the pessimism that life provides us with. Capitalism makes us feel defeated. It creates a reality of defeat, right? So I'm trying to find a way to channel through that of like, what are other possibilities? How else can we move through the woundedness that comes with our contemporary society, with all the languaging that we have to negotiate in how we name and term things, which on the one hand gives us a possibility of creating, of imagining and creating a different reality of being here and therefore experience. But with this, I also know that we need the institutions of higher learning, the museums, the galleries, to be part of this conversation, not to co-opt it. Because it's the co-option of this kind of conversation that derail the work. Because once it's co-opted, it is commercialized. And once it's commercialized, then it's sold back to us as something else. But I think there's a possibility, a possibility in art to reach for freedom and then to take it. If we think of political parties all the world through and the way in which they've had to negotiate their standpoint, their perspective, but particularly had to negotiate the violence that comes with having to dream of freedom. So I'm interested in how art can provide us with something, a possibility for us to imagine ourselves into existence. How art can create a space for us to come up with emancipatory practices that allow us to imagine ourselves into existence in our everyday lived experience, that our lives in the way in which we design them and put them together are in fact a consistent response to the systems that deny us ourselves and deny us our freedom, that we no longer feel we need to react because the way in which we've put ourselves together, that in itself is the response.
Yeah. Ladislava, do you want to? Yes. Okay. Please go ahead.
I would like to add that there is the concept of the trauma, which is like nowadays very very wild and it's not only part of the like specific knowledge, but it's on the pop culture, for example, of each villain's its own trauma. So and each hero has own trauma. And if you're thinking about the trauma, so trauma is behind of everything actually. So it's kind of the modest term. And it's not necessary to be swallowed by the trauma, because all of us, in history, we knew what does it mean feudalism, colonialism, and so on. So if we start to fetishize the trauma, so it's not weighed out. And I would like to add something to the internet you were spoken about, because there is a two concepts of the internet. There is a like beautiful idealistic concept of the internet, which could be presented, which is presented by ideas of Wikipedia, for example. Everyone can share the knowledge, everyone can edit the knowledge. And it's kind of the very common peer-to-peer agenda. So this is kind of the idealistic part of the internet. But to another hand, the internet, it's today, it's only way how to earn the money, because behind the internet are only big corporations, who made a market inside of the internet. Facebook, Google, this is markets. It's nothing else than markets. So there is no freedom. There is no like this idealism behind, like in Wikipedia case. So if this is Wikipedia counter narrative, what is it? So this kind of the maybe metaphor of the freedom, or because it's only the rest of the idealism. I don't know.
What Sibylnik say reminds me also the issue that I saw one of the video. It was saying that after the socialism, I mean the communism ideology has changed in Czechoslovakia, then it seems that you are living in the new free world. But what does the freedom or free means in this new world? It's very much like the commercialism, or very much influenced by the big power like the USSR and etc. So it seems that there's no optimism on whether we can really be free. So is this our conclusion that there's no such thing as freedom? Maybe art is the only place, for freedom, for free imagination, and maybe that's why it keep us going. Keep us making art and hope to bring out our voices and also speak for the people who were unheard. Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your work.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you.